Today we headed to Grand Teton National Park. When we got there, the place did not even look real. The mountains in the background looked fake. We were going to camp at Coulter Bay, and so that's where we started off first. Coulter Bay is right on Jackson Lake, and Jackson Lake was very, very low at this point. These are the boat docks at Coulter Bay. Jackson Lake has a dam, and water had been released from it this summer to provide water to potato farms in Idaho. And so that's the reason that the lake was very low. After we got settled in, we walked around the Lakeshore Trail, which is about 2 miles, and then we did the Heron Pond Trail, which is 3 miles. On this trail, we ran into one of the deer that we saw in many different places on this trip. We, for some reason, became the deer whisperers, and this deer really did not mind us watching it, and in fact, it followed us for a while we were walking down the trail. We finally made our way to Heron Pond, and after we took some pictures, then we decided to visit some other areas of this beautiful national park. Our first stop was at Oxbow Bend. This is a beautiful bend in the Snake River, and the mountains in the distance were just spectacular. Oxbow Bend is an area where wildlife like to gather, and so we were on the lookout for moose and elk. We didn't see any there that day. Then we headed to the east entrance of the park where there is Snake River access. After stopping there and taking some pictures, we stopped at the Snake River Overlook. This is a beautiful area, and when you look west, you can see the mountains in the distance. That night, we finished our evening at Willow Flats and saw a beautiful sunset. If you visit Grand Teton National Park, you have to visit Jenny Lake. It is by far one of the top places to visit at the park, so you better get there early so you can get a parking spot. We left to head to Jenny Lake around 7 a.m. Because we were there so early, it was cold that morning, and the temperature started out in the 30s, but it was a beautiful, sunny day. There are more than 230 miles of hiking trails in the park, but there are a few you don't want to miss, and the first is the Jenny Lake Loop. On our trip, one of the things that we were hoping to see was a moose, and luckily on our hike around Jenny Lake, we had our moose encounter. Bull moose grow antlers every spring and summer and shed them in the late fall and winter. The antlers are mainly used during the breeding season, which is called the rut, which is usually around September, and that is when we were in the park. Another trail you don't want to miss is the Hidden Falls Trail. It is a 5.2-mile hike that can be combined with part of the Jenny Lake Loop. It takes you to the 200-foot cascade of Hidden Falls. Also, you want to visit Inspiration Point. It is a must-see, and it is just past Hidden Falls, and it overlooks the beautiful Jenny Lake. After staying up on Inspiration Point for some time and taking some pictures, we headed back down and continued our loop around Jenny Lake. Jenny Lake is the second largest lake in Grand Teton National Park behind Jackson Lake, and the total hike around this loop is 7.1 miles. And if you add in your side trips to Hidden Falls and Inspiration Point, you can hike well over 10 miles in a day, and that is what we did. Around every corner there was just beautiful views of the Teton Range, and oftentimes we'd stop and just take some pictures of the beautiful scenery. If you're not as ambitious and don't want to hike over 10 miles, there is a shuttle boat that crosses Jenny Lake, and it will put you really close to Hidden Falls and Inspiration Point. After finishing our hike, we stopped in the visitor center and I got some huckleberry soda. It was wonderful soda, and I had never tasted that before. Everywhere you go in Grand Teton National Park, you are just captivated by the rugged mountains that surround you. We then headed to the southern region of the park and visited Mormon Row. This was an area that was settled by Mormons in the early 1900s. We then finished our day at Squawbucker's Landing with another huckleberry soda. On our last morning in Grand Teton National Park, we did the Taggart Lake Bradley Lake Loop. This is a 5.9-mile hike that takes you to two very nice glacier lakes. On the way, we hiked through a wooded forest, but every time we got to a clearing, we were able to see some spectacular views of the Teton Range. Taggart Lake is the largest of these two lakes. It is 305 acres, and it is at the end of Avalanche Canyon. Bradley Lake is a little over 200 acres and is at the end of Garnett Canyon. We stopped several places and took some pictures along the way. After that, we hiked back to our RV and then headed to Jackson, Wyoming. We learned that the town is named Jackson, and then the whole area is called Jackson Hole. Our first stop here was the National Museum of Wildlife Art, and they had this walk where you could stop and see many sculptures along the way. We then ate at the Bunnery Bakery and Restaurant. After eating, we headed around town and came to Jackson Town Square. It is an area where at the four corners are these antler arches, and you can't come to Jackson without taking some pictures there. We then continued our tour of the city and went by the $1 Million Cowboy Bar. After that, we went into many of the boutiques that they had in Jackson and did some shopping. We left the Grand Tetons and Jackson, Wyoming on September 18th. And one of the things that was in the forefront of our minds on our trip was the search for Gabby Patino. She was on the news the whole time we were there, and there was speculation that the last place she was seen was in the Grand Tetons. On a sad note, on September 19th, her body was found at a boondocking site just outside of the Grand Teton National Park. During the rest of our trip out west, we were captivated by her story, and every time we think of Grand Teton National Park, we will also think of Gabby Patino. That night, we finished our trip in Jackson by eating supper at Gun and Barrel Steak and Game House. We had a great meal, and it was a wonderful way to end our time in Wyoming. Now off to Idaho and the Potato Museum.